Francesca Hart's day started with the kind of chaos only a tipped-over crate of lemons could cause, rolling, bouncing, and scattering across the concrete floor of the grocery store's loading dock. "Come on," she muttered, chasing after the last rogue lemon as her manager barked orders behind her. Francesca had 20 minutes to load the last delivery: organic produce, fine cheeses, imported water into the company van and drive it across downtown to the most exclusive building in the city. The Halston Tower. The Penthouse suite. She hated those deliveries. Not because they were hard, but because everything about that building screamed money. The kind of money she'd never have, no matter how many shifts she worked or how many tips she pocketed. Rich people didn't open their doors. They just buzzed you in, and you left the bags outside their expensive doors and walked away. Except this time, when she rang the penthouse doorbell, the door opened. And standing there barefoot, in black slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, was a man who looked like he didn't belong in any grocery store, ever. "Are those my blackberries?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth, his eyes a sharp gray that made her pulse skip. Francesca blinked. Yeah, and 12 other bags." He stepped aside, letting her in. "Bring them in, kitchen's straight down the hall." "I don't usually," she started, but he was already walking away. She followed him reluctantly, weaving through a penthouse so sleek and massive it could have been a hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed everything in sunlight. The skyline looked like it was part of the room. She set the bags on the marble kitchen island and glanced around. "Do you live here alone?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked up from inspecting a receipt. "I do. You always ask your customers that?" "No, just the ones who open their own doors." That made him smile, not a fake, polite smile, but the kind that made her stomach flutter. "I'm Fletcher Ames," he said, holding out his hand. "And you are—" she hesitated, wiping her palm on her jeans before shaking his hand. "Francesca, Fran, if that's easier." "Francesca," he repeated like he actually liked the sound of it. "I've never had a grocery delivery girl walk into my place and sass me 5 seconds in." "I'm not sassing," she said, lifting a brow. "I'm just not used to billionaires answering their own doors." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "How do you know I'm a billionaire?" "I don't." She crossed her arms. "But this place, the marble, the view, the fact that you've got 6 different brands of sparkling water in one order. Come on." He laughed, a low, warm sound that made her insides twist. "You're good." "I didn't say I was wrong." "You're not." She should have left then. She should have turned around, said "have a nice day," and walked out like she always did. But something in the way he looked at her, unapologetically curious, like she wasn't just another person passing through his life, kept her rooted to the spot. "You want a water?" he asked. "I'm on the clock." "I won't tell." She stayed. Just long enough to drink one of those sparkling waters and listen to him talk about how he accidentally ordered 3 pounds of goat cheese instead of 1. She laughed. He watched her like he hadn't laughed in a while, and when she left, he walked her to the elevator. "See you next time, Francesca," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Don't get used to it. I rotate shifts." He didn't say anything then, just nodded, that same smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, but when she turned around, she felt his eyes still on her. 3 days later, her manager handed her a slip. "Halston Tower again. Penthouse." Francesca frowned. "Derek usually takes those." "Client requested you." Her stomach flipped, the elevator dinged. The penthouse door opened before she even rang the bell. "You again," she said. Fletcher leaned against the doorway, dressed in a charcoal vest over a white shirt, no tie. "I was hoping it'd be you. I'm not your personal shopper." "You could be." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I mean, if I keep ordering groceries and requesting you, eventually you'll have to admit I'm more fun than stocking shelves." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you flirting with me?" "Would it bother you if I was?" "Depends on how big your tip is." He laughed again. And this time it wasn't just warm, it was something else. Something that made her chest ache a little. When she finished putting the bags down, he handed her an envelope. She opened it on the elevator ride down. It was a tip, $500, cash. Her heart pounded. What billionaire tips $500 for groceries, one who's trying to get your attention? It kept happening. Week after week, every Friday another order, another visit. Sometimes he'd ask questions about her, where she grew up, if she liked music, what she wanted to do if she wasn't working 3 jobs. Sometimes he'd cook fancy things, like pan-seared scallops or pasta made from scratch. Sometimes she stayed longer than she should have. She knew she shouldn't be falling for him. He was too rich, too out of reach, too everything. And yet she liked the way he looked at her, like she was the most interesting person in the room. She liked that he listened, that he remembered things she said, that he never once made her feel small for not having money. One night, as she was about to leave, he stopped her. "Francesca," she turned. He looked hesitant for the first time. "Would you ever go to dinner with someone who doesn't need groceries delivered to see you?" There was a pause. She could have said no, she could have walked away. But she looked at him, really looked, and realized she wanted to see what this could turn into, so she said, "Only if he lets me bring dessert." He grinned. "Deal." And just like that, everything changed. Francesca stood in front of the mirror in her tiny apartment, adjusting the collar of her navy blouse for the 3rd time. She didn't own anything fancy, not the kind of thing you'd wear to dinner with a man who had a sculpture in his foyer that probably cost more than her entire yearly income, but she'd ironed it twice, paired it with black trousers and her nicest boots, and told herself it was enough. Still, she couldn't keep her pulse from quickening as she rode the elevator up to the top of Halston Tower. This wasn't work anymore. This wasn't groceries. This was a date. When the doors opened, Fletcher was waiting. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her like he was trying to memorize everything she was wearing. His dark jacket was open over a slate gray shirt, sleeves buttoned, collar crisp, but his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. "I thought you said you weren't going to impress me," he said quietly. "I didn't," she replied. "This is just me clean." He laughed, but it wasn't the same easy tone he usually used. It was quieter, warmer, like the sound meant something. She followed him into the kitchen, but instead of the usual bags and marble counters, the dining table was set with porcelain plates, 2 wine glasses, and tall, white candles flickering gently. "You lit candles?" she asked. "I figured you deserved more than takeout eaten on a countertop." He pulled out her chair. She hesitated for half a second before sitting down. "What are we eating?" she asked, eyeing the covered tray in the center of the table. "I cooked," he said, uncovering the dish. "Lobster risotto. And before you ask, yes, I know how to make it, and no, I didn't poison anything." She raised an eyebrow. "Confident." He poured wine into her glass. Optimistic, they ate, and for a while it was quiet, not awkward, but comfortable. Like neither of them needed to fill the silence unless it mattered. Finally, Francesca set her fork down and looked across the table. "Why me?" she asked. Fletcher glanced up. "What do you mean, you could have anyone? Literally anyone. Why chase the girl who delivers your groceries?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a kind of calm intensity. "Because you're not trying to be anyone else," he said. "You don't care about any of this." He gestured vaguely to the view, the wine, the linen napkins, "and that's exactly why you belong here." She stared at him for a moment, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. "You don't even know me," she said, quieter now. "I know you save the bruised fruit from the trash and take it home. I know you hum when you're organizing bags. I know you wear a different necklace every time I see you, but always tuck it under your shirt like it's not for anyone else to see. And I know you think people like me only talk to women for fun." He paused. "But I'm not talking to you for fun, Francesca." She looked down at her plate, suddenly unsure of what to do with her hands. He didn't press her. Instead, he stood and walked to the edge of the room where the glass wall met the skyline. After a moment, he spoke again. "I wasn't always like this." She looked up. "I built a company straight out of college. It took off. I made a deal that exploded bigger than I ever imagined. Then everything changed," he said. "Suddenly I was on magazine covers, getting invited to charity galas, meeting people who smiled too hard and talked too fast. and I let it happen. I became what they needed me to be. She stood quietly, waiting, but I forgot who I was in the process. Until you knocked on my door with 3 bags of vegetables and didn't even blink at the penthouse. Francesca folded her arms, leaning against the back of the chair but keeping her eyes on him. That's the most poetic thing anyone's ever said about vegetables. He turned, grinning. You made me want to remember who I was before the suits and the contracts. She walked over slowly, stopping a few feet from him. And who is that? I'm still figuring it out, he admitted, but I want you to be part of it. Her breath caught. I'm not a project, Fletcher. You're not. You're the reason I stopped pretending I have everything when I don't. A long beat passed between them. Then she said, I don't do games, and I definitely don't do affairs with men who treat women like trophies. Good, he said, because I don't want a trophy. I want something real. She blinked once, twice, then looked away because it was too much, too fast, too honest. I should go, she said, half turning. Francesca, I need to think. He didn't follow her, didn't try to stop her. Just walked her to the elevator again like he always did and held the door open. But this time, when it closed between them, there was something new in the silence. Want. And the ache of something that could become everything. The next week passed with an unnerving quiet. Francesca didn't hear from Fletcher. No orders, no texts, no envelopes with her name on them, just silence. She told herself it was fine, it was better this way. Whatever that night had stirred in her, whatever heat had curled in her chest when he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his penthouse, it had been a mistake. A fantasy. Men like him didn't pursue girls who lived above laundromats and worked double shifts. No matter how many lobster dinners or candlelit table settings or intense declarations they made, still, when her manager handed her a folded note on Thursday morning, her heart jumped before she could stop it. Guy came by while you were on break, he said. Left this for you. She opened the note with cautious fingers. It wasn't long, just an address. In cursive handwriting she instantly recognized. And underneath it, a single sentence. Come if you want answers. She stared at it for a long moment before tucking it into her back pocket and getting back to work. That night, she stood outside the address, a gallery tucked behind a wrought iron gate in the West End. The building was tall and narrow, its glass windows glowing gold against the dark sky. There was no doorman, no signage, just a single name etched into the wall beside the entrance, Eames. She stepped inside. There were no other guests, no music. Just quiet and light and Fletcher, standing alone in the center of the room, surrounded by canvases that stretched from floor to ceiling. She stopped in the doorway, unsure. You came, he said quietly, turning toward her. Francesca crossed her arms. You left me hanging for 6 days. I know. Do you always invite people to mysterious addresses instead of just apologizing? I didn't want to say sorry, he said. I wanted to show you. She looked past him. The pieces on the walls were abstract, vibrant, layered, sharp with color and motion. Some were chaotic, others were restrained, but every single one pulsed with feeling. He walked toward the far wall, stopping in front of a canvas dominated by a single brushstroke of deep red slashing through a field of gray. I used to paint, he said, before the company. Before everything. Francesca stepped closer, watching the way his eyes stayed fixed on the canvas. No one knows, he continued. Not the board, not the press, not even my family. I haven't shown anyone these. She glanced at him. Why me? Because you make me want to be honest, he said. And that scares the hell out of me. Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. He turned fully, facing her now. I haven't been fair to you, Francesca. I tried to keep things light, charming, easy, but nothing about you is easy. And I realized if I kept pretending I didn't care deeper than I should, I'd lose the only real thing I've found in years. She stayed quiet, letting the words land, letting the weight of them settle into the air between them. You disappeared, she said finally. No explanation. Nothing. I was scared, he admitted. I haven't let someone pass the surface in a long time, and when you looked at me that night, I knew you saw everything. She tilted her head slightly. And you didn't like being seen. I wasn't sure I deserved it. She looked past him to a small canvas near the corner. Tucked between two massive pieces, it was easy to miss. But the colors were softer, deeper. The brushwork more careful. She walked to it. He followed, his voice quieter now. "That one's new." "Is it me?" she asked, not turning. "It's how I feel when you leave." Francesca stared at it for a long moment, then she turned to him. "I grew up thinking people only stayed until something better came along," she said. "I don't get attached easily. I'm not going anywhere. You're a billionaire, Fletcher. So what? So you could have everything, and yet you're standing here in an empty gallery trying to convince the girl who delivers your produce that this is real." He stepped closer. "Because it is." Her eyes searched his. "What if I don't fit into your world? Then I'll build one that fits you." She blinked once, slowly. "That's a nice line." "It's not a line." She studied him, her voice low. "I'm scared too, I know. I don't know how to trust someone who lives in a world I can't even afford to visit." He reached out carefully, his hand brushing hers. "Then let me earn it." They stood there in the quiet space between paint and possibility, hands barely touching. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. "I don't want a gallery full of promises," she whispered. "You won't get one," he said. "Just me trying every damn day." She nodded slowly. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside, something settled. Something that felt like the beginning of a truth neither of them had dared to hope for. The invitation arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered by a courier in a black suit, and Ty who didn't blink when Francesca answered the door in pajama pants and socks. "From Mr. Ames," he said, offering the heavy cream envelope with a short bow before disappearing down the stairwell. Inside, the card was thick, the ink real, the handwriting unmistakable. "Friday. 7 o'clock. Bring nothing but yourself." She stared at the words until the gold trim blurred. The week had been uneasily quiet. Not because they hadn't spoken. Fletcher had called once, short and direct, just to say he hoped she was okay, but because she'd been unraveling everything in her head. The brushstrokes. The gallery. The look in his eyes when he said he wanted to earn her trust, not just win it. She didn't know what it would mean to accept this invitation. But she knew exactly what it would mean to ignore it. So on Friday at 6:45, she stood outside Halston Tower in a black coat and a pair of heels she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding. Her stomach twisted as the doorman greeted her by name and opened the glass doors without question. The elevator rose in silence. When it opened, she didn't find the sleek, quiet penthouse she remembered. This time, the lights were low, music played softly from somewhere she couldn't see, and the scent of something warm and sweet drifted from the kitchen. She stepped inside, scanning the space. Fletcher stood near the windows, facing away from her, wearing a dark suit with no tie. His hands were in his pockets, his posture almost uncertain. "You look like you're about to give a speech," she said. He turned at the sound of her voice, and for a moment, he didn't speak. "Then you came, you invited me. I wasn't sure if you would." Francesca stepped further inside, eyes flicking over the space. The table was set again, but this time with something different. No candles, no porcelain, just 2 bowls, a basket of bread, and a pot on a trivet in the center. "You made soup, carrot ginger," Fletcher said. "I asked someone if it was too boring for a date, and they said I should cook what I'd crave on a hard day." "You asked someone, my grandmother." Francesca blinked, then laughed. "You have a grandmother who gives you dating advice? She's 92 and thinks I'm emotionally stunted. She's not wrong." They sat. The soup was simple, hot, and surprisingly good. They didn't talk much at first, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of silence you only get with someone who's decided not to pretend anymore. After they ate, he poured them both tea from a ceramic pot she was fairly certain hadn't existed in his kitchen 2 weeks ago. "So," she said, setting her mug down, "is this your way of telling me you're done with the showy stuff?" "I was never trying to impress you," he said. "I just didn't know how else to say I wanted more." She tilted her head. "And now you do," he nodded. "I want to build something that doesn't rely on dinners or gifts or high floors. I want to build it with you." Francesca's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not knowing if you fit into my world," he continued. "And I realized. Maybe the world I built isn't the one I want anymore." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been taking meetings in offices I don't like, signing deals I don't care about, and showing up at events I forget the moment I leave. And the only time I feel like myself is when I'm with you." She stared at him, heart pounding. "I want to change things," Fletcher said. "I'm stepping back from the board. I've already started the paperwork. I'm keeping the company, but I'm handing over day-to-day control. I want time to paint. To figure out what comes next. And you decided this in a week." "I decided it the moment you walked out of here, and I didn't stop you." Francesca felt her fingers curl against the mug. "I didn't ask you to give up your empire." "You didn't have to," he said. "I realized I could keep building something that looks impressive to strangers. Or I could build something real with someone who sees me when it's all stripped away." She stood slowly, pushing her chair back. He rose too, eyes never leaving hers. "You're serious," she said. "I'm not doing this to prove anything. I'm doing it because I want it, because I want you." She stepped toward him, then stopped. "What if I still need time?" she asked softly. "Then I'll wait," he said, "but I'll keep showing up every day, no expectations, just hope." Her chest rose and fell. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who'd peeled back every layer: power, wealth, charm, and offered her something most people never dared to: the truth. Francesca stepped forward, closing the space between them. "I don't want you to wait," she said. "I want you to come with me," he frowned. "Where?" She pulled a folded paper from her coat pocket, the application to a small community arts center on the east side of the city. Her friend had told her about it weeks ago. They were looking for part-time volunteers. People who could help with youth classes, outreach, and gallery setup. "I never showed anyone this," she said. "I thought it was stupid." Fletcher took the paper carefully, reading it with quiet focus. "It's not stupid," he said. "It's brilliant." She met his eyes. "I want to do something that matters. Even if it's small. Then let's do it together. You'd really show up to a building with peeling walls and folding chairs and teach kids how to stretch canvas?" "If you're there," he said. "Absolutely." Francesca laughed, a real, full laugh, and for the first time in weeks, the tightness in her chest eased. He took her hand. "Come with me," he said. "We'll make something that's ours." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming, terrifying beauty of being seen, of being chosen. Weeks later, the Arts Center accepted their joint proposal. Fletcher donated enough to renovate the entire building, but insisted they not add his name to any wall. Francesca taught her first class in a pair of paint-splattered jeans, with Fletcher quietly restocking brushes in the background. They didn't live in the penthouse anymore. They moved into a sunlit loft with crooked floors and more windows than walls. He painted again. She delivered groceries part-time while finishing her certification in art therapy. And on a quiet spring evening, he asked her to marry him in the middle of the gallery they'd built together. No audience, no cameras, just him, a ring, and a sketch of her taped to the easel behind him. She said yes before he could finish the question. And in that moment, surrounded by messy canvases and mismatched chairs, Francesca realized she hadn't just delivered groceries to a penthouse. She'd delivered herself into a life she never thought she deserved, with a man who proved every day that she did. Rain tapped gently against the loft's wide windows, streaking the glass with silver as the city blurred beyond it. Inside, Francesca sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands covered in cobalt blue paint, a half-finished mural stretching across the gallery's back wall. Brushes lay scattered around her, and a drop cloth protected the scuffed wood beneath her knees. "What's this one going to be?" Fletcher asked as he crouched beside her, watching her work. She didn't look up. "A storm breaking." He studied the early shapes: sweeping clouds, sharp diagonal lines, a streak of gold just beginning to form in the center. "Because of the rain. Because of everything we've been through," she replied, finally glancing at him. "I wanted to paint the moment everything shifts, He reached out, brushing a speck of blue from her cheek with his thumb. "You're the one who shifted everything." She leaned into his touch for a second, quiet. Then she grabbed a brush, dipped it in the pale yellow, and handed it to him. "Help me finish the light." He hesitated. "You sure? You're not just the guy who paints in secret anymore," she said. "You're part of this now." They painted together, side by side, hands moving in rhythm until the storm gave way to something luminous. When they stepped back, the wall glowed with energy and peace colors crashing, then calming like a held breath finally released. Later, they sat on the rooftop wrapped in a shared blanket, drinking hot tea from mismatched mugs. The rain had stopped, and the city shimmered beneath a clearing sky. Francesca leaned her head against Fletcher's shoulder. "Do you ever miss the old life?" He didn't answer right away. "Then, I miss the illusion of control sometimes, the schedule, the certainty. But then I remember how empty it all felt, how loud the silence was at the top." "I don't miss that." She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "I used to think I'd never want anything I couldn't earn myself, that letting someone give me something meant giving up part of me." "You haven't given up anything," he said. "You've only grown, so have I." She turned to face him. "You're not afraid anymore." "I'm still afraid," he admitted. "But now the fear feels worth it." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the hum of the city below and the occasional creak of the old rooftop under them. "I got a letter," she said softly, "from the community center. They want me to lead a new program in the fall. Full-time. They said the kids love me." Fletcher smiled. "Of course they do. It's a big step. So take it." She looked at him. "It means long hours, less time here, less time with you." He took her hand. "Then I'll be the one waiting when you come home. I'll cook, I'll clean, I'll paint weird things and hang them in your path until you trip over them." She laughed, warm and quiet, and leaned into him. "You really would." "I want a life that bends around what we both love," he said. "Not one that forces us to choose." Her voice went softer. "I didn't know men like you existed." He kissed her temple. "I didn't know women like you existed either." The following weekend, they stood together in front of a white archway strung with soft yellow lights in the garden behind the art center, surrounded by close friends, local artists, and a few wide-eyed kids from Francesca's classes who had begged to be the flower bearers. She wore a simple ivory dress with paint still faintly staining her fingertips. He wore a navy suit, no tie, and a silver ring on a chain around his neck, the one his grandmother had given him when he turned 18, the one she said he'd know when to pass on. "I never thought I'd say vows in front of a mural painted by second graders," Francesca whispered as they stood together under the arch. "I never thought I'd say vows to someone who can quote grocery produce codes from memory," Fletcher whispered back. She grinned, but her eyes were wet. "I love you. I love you more." Impossible. They exchanged rings beneath the humming lights, and when he kissed her, the kids cheered loud enough to startle a nearby pigeon into flight. Later, at the reception held inside the gallery, Fletcher surprised her by pulling a red velvet curtain off a new canvas he'd painted in secret, a portrait of her. Mid-laugh. Seated on the gallery's paint-splattered floor surrounded by jars of brushes, and a sunrise breaking through the window behind her. "I wanted to remember the moment I knew," he said, his voice steady. "The moment I realized I'd never want another day without you in it." She stared at the painting, then at him. "You can't just keep doing things like this. You're going to ruin all my expectations for the rest of my life." He leaned close, his hand on her waist. "That's the idea." They danced in the center of the room, barefoot under string lights, surrounded by art and laughter and the scent of fresh flowers. There was no orchestra, no champagne towers, no velvet ropes. Just music from a record player and the kind of joy that didn't need an audience to be real. As the night wound down, Francesca stood beside Fletcher on the gallery's back steps, watching the last of the guests drift into the night. "We built this," she said softly. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, "and we'll keep building. Whatever comes next, exactly." She turned in his arms, resting her forehead against his. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "We already are." They kissed beneath the stars, the paint still drying on their hands, the future wide open and waiting. And in that quiet, perfect moment, there was nothing missing. They had everything. Together. Forever.